With just enough tips to cover her mother's next chemotherapy treatment, Maya Chun is counting down the days until her pre-med finals, when her violent ex-boyfriend Derek storms back into her life, demanding money she doesn't have. But when a mysterious Korean man in an expensive suit witnesses her terror, Derek's threats become the least of her worries. At 24, Maya balanced the worn metal trays of Nightingale Diner with the relentless demands of her pre-med courses at City College. She was practical, focused, and knew the exact value of every crumpled dollar bill stuffed into her apron pocket. Her natural hair, styled in a voluminous twist that caught the harsh fluorescent light, seemed to glow even in the dim atmosphere of the late-night diner. She was driven by an uncompromising vision, a stethoscope around her neck, a life saving others, and a world where she never had to worry about choosing between textbooks and her mother's cancer medication. Tonight felt different. Maya wiped down table 6 for the third time, her movements efficient but tense. The diner's usual cast of insomniacs and third-shift workers had thinned to just a few regulars. She counted her tips again. $43. Not enough for Mom's next treatment, but enough to keep the lights on for another week. Her fingers unconsciously rubbed the faded yellow bruise on her left wrist, a souvenir from Derek's last visit 3 weeks ago. The bell above the front door chimed with a sharp, grating sound that made Maya's shoulders instinctively tighten. She looked up from wiping the counter and felt her blood turn cold. Derek Patterson stood in the doorway, his sandy brown hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and carrying the sour smell of cheap alcohol and cigarettes. His bloodshot eyes scanned the nearly empty diner until they locked onto hers with predatory satisfaction. Maya's heart began hammering against her ribs. She should have expected this. Derek never stayed away for long, especially when he was broke. She forced herself to continue wiping the counter, her movements steady despite the tremor in her hands. Maybe if she ignored him, maybe if she didn't give him the reaction he wanted, he would leave. She had learned that Derek fed on fear like a parasite. Derek approached the counter with the swagger of a man who believed he owned everything he saw. "I need money, Maya," he said without preamble, his voice carrying that familiar edge of barely controlled violence. "You've been working extra shifts. Don't tell me you don't have it." Maya kept her eyes on the counter, focusing on a water stain that refused to come clean. "I don't have anything for you, Derek. We're done. You know that." Her voice was steady, but she could feel the familiar cold spreading through her chest. This was how it always started. The casual demand. The assumption that she owed him something. Derek slammed his palm against the counter, making the sugar dispenser jump. The sharp crack echoed through the quiet diner. "Don't play games with me. I know you've been stashing cash. Your mother's medical bills aren't going anywhere, and neither am I." Maya finally looked up, meeting his gaze with as much strength as she could summon. Her mother's cancer treatment had been Derek's favorite weapon for months. He knew exactly which buttons to press, which wounds to reopen. "I'm not giving you anything," she said quietly. "Find someone else to fund your drinking." Derek's face darkened, and Maya saw the dangerous shift in his expression that always preceded violence. He reached across the counter and grabbed her wrist, his fingers finding the exact spot where the old bruise was finally fading. His grip tightened like a vice, and Maya couldn't suppress the small gasp of pain that escaped her lips. "You think you can just throw me away?" he hissed, his breath hot and acidic against her face. "You think you're better than me because you're in school, playing dress-up as a doctor. But you're nothing without me. Nobody's going to want damaged goods." Maya tried to pull her wrist free, but Derek's grip tightened further. She could feel the old injury flaring back to life, the deep ache that had taken weeks to subside. Her mind raced through options. She could scream, but the few remaining customers were elderly and unlikely to intervene. She could call the police, but Derek had never left enough evidence before, and she couldn't afford to miss work while dealing with paperwork and court dates. The front door chimed again, but Maya barely registered the sound. Her focus was entirely consumed by Derek's grip and the familiar pattern of escalation she had learned to recognize. Derek was building towards something worse than bruises. His visits were becoming more frequent, more violent, more desperate. Then Derek's grip loosened slightly. His attention had shifted to something behind Maya, and his expression changed from anger to uncertainty. Maya turned to see what had caught his attention and felt her breath catch in her throat. A man sat in the corner booth, and he was watching them with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating prey. He was Korean, probably in his late 30s, with sharp, almost sculpted features and dark hair swept back from his face. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray and obviously expensive, the kind that cost more than Maya made in 3 months. Everything about him radiated wealth and control, from his precise posture to the way his dark eyes missed absolutely nothing. Most unsettling was the way he watched Derek's grip on Maya's wrist. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but there was something in his gaze that made the air feel heavy and dangerous. He held a cup of coffee in his long fingers, but Maya had the distinct impression that the beverage was forgotten. His entire attention was focused on the scene playing out at the counter. Derek seemed to sense the scrutiny and released Maya's wrist with a dismissive gesture. "This isn't over," he muttered, shooting a hostile glare toward the corner booth. "You owe me, Maya, and I always collect what's mine." He stormed out of the diner, the bell clanging violently behind him. Maya stood at the counter, rubbing her wrist and trying to steady her breathing. The bruise was already beginning to darken again, finger-shaped marks standing out starkly against her brown skin. The man in the expensive suit rose from his booth and approached the counter with measured steps. Up close, Maya could see that he moved with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to command. His presence seemed to fill the small space around them, heavy with authority and barely contained power. "That's quite a bruise," he said quietly, his English perfect but carrying a slight accent that made his words sound precise and deliberate. His dark eyes were fixed on her wrist. Maya automatically pulled down her sleeve, a gesture so practiced it had become instinct. "I'm clumsy," she replied, the lie tasting bitter and familiar on her tongue. The man's gaze lifted to her face, and Maya felt as though he could see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "Did you fall on someone's fingers?" he asked, and it wasn't really a question. His voice carried no judgment, only a calm observation that made Maya's stomach clench with anxiety. Maya's throat felt tight. She wanted to maintain the lie, to protect herself with the familiar shield of denial. But something in his steady gaze made deception feel impossible. He had seen Derek's hand on her wrist. He had witnessed her flinch, her fear, her helplessness. There was no point in pretending. "I don't know what you mean," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. The man nodded slowly, as if her non-answer confirmed everything he suspected. "My name is Kim Junho," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Maya tensed, but he only withdrew a simple black business card. "When you're ready to stop falling down, call me." Maya stared at the card in his outstretched hand. The cardstock was heavy, expensive, with only a phone number printed in silver. No company name, no address, nothing to indicate what kind of business Kim Junho conducted. But Maya had the distinct impression that whatever he did, it involved the kind of power that could make problems disappear permanently. "Why would you want to help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." Kim Junho's expression softened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment Maya glimpsed something vulnerable beneath his controlled exterior. "Let's just say I have experience with men who hurt women," he said, "and I have resources to ensure they stop." Maya reached out with trembling fingers and took the card. The cardstock was thick and smooth against her skin, warm from his pocket. She looked up to meet his gaze again and saw something that made her heart skip. It wasn't pity or charity in his dark eyes. It was recognition. He saw her strength, her struggle, her worth. For the first time in months, Maya felt like someone was looking at her and seeing more than a victim. Kim Junho placed a $20 bill on the counter, far more than his coffee cost. "Take care of yourself, Maya-chan," he said, and Maya realized with a start that she had never told him her name. He walked out of the diner with the same measured steps, leaving Maya standing at the counter with his business card clutched in her hand and 1,000 questions spinning through her mind. Through the window, she watched him slide into a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than her mother's house. The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the late-night traffic. Maya looked down at the card again, feeling its weight in her palm. She should throw it away. This stranger, this obviously dangerous man who somehow knew her name, getting involved with him would be the height of stupidity. But as she rubbed the fresh bruises on her wrist, Maya found herself slipping the card into her apron pocket anyway. For the first time in months, She felt like she might have options. Maya's shift ended at midnight, but she lingered in the diner for another 20 minutes, wiping tables that were already clean and organizing supplies that didn't need organizing. Kim Junho's business card felt like it was burning a hole through her apron pocket. Every time she touched it, she felt a mixture of hope and terror that made her hands shake. Finally, she couldn't delay any longer. The night manager, Carlos, was giving her questioning looks, and she needed to get home before the last bus stopped running. Maya gathered her things, clocked out, and pushed through the back exit into the employee parking lot behind the diner. The October air was sharp and cold, cutting through her thin uniform jacket. The parking lot was poorly lit, with only 2 working streetlights casting pools of yellow light across the cracked asphalt. Maya's beat-up Honda Civic sat in the far corner, surrounded by shadows that seemed deeper and more threatening than usual. She was halfway to her car when she heard the voices. Well, look who finally decided to come outside. Maya's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Derek stepped out from behind a large pickup truck, and he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, both larger and more intimidating than Derek himself. Maya recognized one of them as Tommy Briggs, Derek's cousin who had spent 3 years in state prison for assault. The other was a stranger, but his dead eyes and prison tattoos told Maya everything she needed to know. Derek looked different than he had inside the diner. More confident, more dangerous. The uncertainty she had seen when Kim Junho was watching had evaporated, replaced by the cruel satisfaction of a predator who had cornered his prey. His hands were clenched into fists, and Maya could see the familiar vein throbbing in his temple that always appeared before he became violent. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might burst. Her mouth went dry, and her legs felt like they might give out beneath her. This wasn't like Derek's usual confrontations. He had never brought backup before. He had never cornered her in a dark parking lot with no witnesses. I told you this wasn't over, Derek said, advancing slowly. Maya backed toward her car, but she could see Tommy moving to cut off that escape route. You embarrassed me in there, acting like you're too good for me, acting like you don't owe me. Derek, please, Maya said, her voice coming out thinner than she intended. I don't have any money. You know that. I'm barely making ends meet. Derek laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Oh, Maya. Sweet, stupid Maya. You think this is about money now? You think I came here with my friends just to collect a few dollars in tips? The stranger took a step closer, and Maya could smell the cigarettes and stale beer on his breath. She's pretty, he said to Derek, his eyes crawling over Maya in a way that made her skin crawl. You weren't kidding about that. How much you figure we could get for her? Maya's entire body went rigid with terror. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about Derek's wounded pride or his desperate need to control her. This was something far worse. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. They were talking about selling her. About trafficking her like a commodity. Derek grinned, showing teeth stained yellow from cigarettes and neglect. See, Maya, you've been thinking too small. Your tips, your pathetic little savings account, that's nothing. But you? You're worth real money to the right people. Young, pretty, college-educated. There are buyers who pay top dollar for girls like you. Maya backed against her car, the cold metal pressing through her jacket. Her hands fumbled in her pocket for her keys, but her fingers were shaking too badly to grip them properly. She could run, but there were 3 of them and only one exit from the parking lot. She could scream, but the nearest building was a warehouse that had been empty for months. You can't do this, she whispered, hating how weak and terrified she sounded. This is insane. People will look for me. My mother, my professors, the police will investigate. Derek stepped close enough that Maya could see the red veins in his eyes, could smell the alcohol and rage on his breath. Your mother's dying, Maya. Who's going to believe she remembers what happened to you? And your professors? You're just another student who dropped out, couldn't handle the pressure. Happens all the time. Tommy had reached her car now and was leaning against the driver's door, blocking her escape completely. The stranger was pulling something from his jacket pocket, and Maya caught the glint of metal in the streetlight. A syringe. They had come prepared. They had planned this. Maya's vision started to blur with panic. She was going to disappear tonight. They were going to drug her, take her somewhere, and sell her to monsters who would use her until she broke or died. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she felt her legs start to buckle. That's when the black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The car moved like liquid shadow, its engine purring with expensive power. It glided between the potholes and debris with the grace of a predator approaching prey. The headlights swept across the scene, illuminating Derek and his companions with harsh white light. Derek squinted against the glare, his confidence faltering for the first time. "What the hell?" he muttered, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there moments before. The sedan stopped precisely 10 feet away from their group. The engine cut off, and the sudden silence was deafening. Maya held her breath, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The driver's door opened, and Kim Junho stepped out. He moved with the same controlled precision Maya had observed in the diner, but now there was something else in his posture. Something cold and lethal that made the air feel heavy with danger. His expensive suit was immaculate despite the late hour, and his dark eyes reflected the streetlight like black mirrors. Kim Junho surveyed the scene with the calm assessment of a man who had seen violence before and was not impressed by amateurs. His gaze moved from Derek to Tommy to the stranger with the syringe, cataloging threats with professional efficiency. When his eyes found Maya pressed against her car, something shifted in his expression. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Gentlemen," Kim Junho said, his voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. His accent made the words sound formal, almost polite, but there was nothing civilized in his tone. "You appear to be threatening a friend of mine." Derek tried to summon his earlier bravado, but Maya could see his hands shaking. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "This is none of your business. Walk away." Kim Junho smiled, and Maya felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a shark that had found wounded prey in the water. "My name is Kim Junho," he said, taking a single step forward. Derek and his companions instinctively stepped back. "And Miss Chen's safety has become very much my business." The stranger with the syringe decided he had heard enough. He lunged toward Maya, probably hoping to grab her and use her as leverage. It was a mistake that lasted exactly 2 seconds. Kim Junho moved like lightning. Maya barely saw him cross the distance, but suddenly the stranger was on the ground, clutching his wrist and screaming. The syringe skittered across the asphalt, its contents glinting in the streetlight. Kim Junho stood over the fallen man, his suit still perfectly pressed, not even breathing hard. Tommy reached for something inside his jacket, but Kim Junho's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't," Kim Junho said conversationally. "The last man who drew a weapon on me required reconstructive surgery. Assuming they found enough pieces to reconstruct." Tommy's hand froze. Derek looked like he was going to vomit. "Now," Kim Junho continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, "you gentlemen are going to leave. You're going to leave this city. And you're going to forget that Miss Chen exists. Because if I see any of you again, if I hear that you've contacted her in any way, I will demonstrate why my reputation in certain circles is built on permanent solutions to temporary problems." Derek found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "You don't know who you're messing with. I have connections. People who won't like you interfering." Kim Junho tilted his head slightly, like he was considering an interesting philosophical problem. "Mr. Patterson," he said, and Derek's face went white at hearing his full name. "I know exactly who you are. I know about your gambling debts to the Torino family. I know about the warrant for your arrest in Nevada. I know about the 3 women who have restraining orders against you. And I know that none of your so-called connections will help you if you continue to be a problem." Derek staggered backward, his face ashen. Tommy was already heading for their truck, dragging the injured stranger with him. Derek followed, moving like a man in shock. "Remember," Kim Junho called after them, his voice pleasant and terrifying. "Permanent solutions." The truck roared to life and squealed out of the parking lot, tires smoking against the asphalt. Kim Junho watched them disappear into traffic, then turned to Maya. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle now, all traces of menace replaced by genuine concern. Maya stared at him, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Kim Junho had appeared like an avenging angel and eliminated 3 dangerous men without breaking a sweat. She should be grateful. She should be relieved. Instead, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss she didn't understand. "I'm okay," she managed to say. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and shaky. Kim Junho nodded. "I'll drive you home," he said. It wasn't a request. Maya wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some illusion of independence, but her legs were shaking too badly to drive. She nodded mutely and followed Kim Junho to his sedan. The interior was luxurious beyond anything Maya had ever experienced. Leather seats that probably cost more than her car, climate control that adjusted automatically to her body temperature, and a silence so complete it felt like being wrapped in velvet. They drove in quiet for several minutes before Maya found her voice. "How did you know where to find me?" she asked. Kim Junho glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I was concerned about your safety," he said simply. "My concerns appear to have been justified." Maya stared out the window, watching the city blur past. On the radio, the late-night news was playing softly. The announcer's voice was calm and professional as he reported the evening's events. A car explosion on Highway 95 had killed 3 men, believed to be connected to an underground gambling ring. Police were investigating, but had no immediate leads. Maya's blood turned cold. She looked at Kim Junho's profile, illuminated by the dashboard lights. His expression was serene, almost peaceful. "That was them, wasn't it?" she whispered. Kim Junho's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "Some problems require permanent solutions," he said quietly. Maya closed her eyes and tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened. 3 men were dead because of her, because Kim Junho had decided to protect her. She should be horrified. She should demand he stop the car and let her out. Instead, she felt a profound sense of relief flooding through her body. Derek was gone. He would never hurt her again. Never threaten her mother, never grab her wrist, never corner her in dark parking lots. For the first time in over a year, Maya felt like she could breathe freely. "Thank you," she said, and meant it completely. Kim Junho met her eyes in the mirror. His smile was gentle this time, without any hint of danger. "You're welcome, Maya-chun," he said. "And remember, you have my card when you're ready to stop running." 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Maya went to classes, worked her shifts at the diner, and visited her mother at the cancer center, but everything felt different. She found herself looking over her shoulder constantly, checking for Derek's truck, scanning faces in crowds. But Derek never appeared. Neither did Tommy or his nameless friend. It was as if they had simply vanished from existence. The news reports had been brief and matter-of-fact. 3 men killed in a car explosion, believed to be connected to underground gambling. Police had no leads and seemed in no hurry to develop any. Maya wondered if Kim Junho's influence extended into law enforcement, if there were people being paid to look the other way when certain problems disappeared. On Wednesday afternoon, Maya was leaving her organic chemistry lab when a man in an expensive suit approached her outside the science building. He was Asian, probably Korean like Kim Junho, with the same air of controlled professionalism that seemed to be a uniform requirement for whatever organization they represented. "Miss Chun," he said, his English precise and formal. "My employer would like to meet with you. Today, if possible." Maya clutched her textbooks against her chest, her heart rate spiking with anxiety. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," she said. The man's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a kindness that surprised her. "Mr. Kim Junho simply wishes to discuss a business opportunity," he said. "You are under no obligation, of course, but he believes you might find the conversation beneficial." Maya thought about her mother's medical bills, stacked on the kitchen table like accusations of her inadequacy. She thought about her own student loans, growing larger every semester. She thought about Derek's threats and the syringe glinting in the parking lot. "Where?" she asked. The ride through downtown took 20 minutes. But Maya felt like she was traveling to another world. The sedan was even more luxurious than Kim Junho's personal vehicle, with tinted windows that made the city outside seem distant and unreal. They passed through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached a glass tower in the financial district that stretched toward the sky like a monument to power and wealth. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was silent except for the soft hum of expensive machinery. Maya's reflection in the polished steel doors looked small and out of place, a scholarship student in discount clothes surrounded by materials that cost more than her entire wardrobe. The elevator opened into a reception area that looked like it belonged in a magazine about luxury living. The floors were marble, veined with gold that caught the light from enormous windows overlooking the city. Original artwork hung on walls paneled in dark wood that probably came from trees older than Maya's grandmother. Everything whispered of wealth so vast, it was almost incomprehensible. Kim Junho's office occupied a corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls that offered a panoramic view of the city sprawling below. The desk was a massive piece of dark wood, polished to a mirror shine, and bearing only a single laptop, a fountain pen, and a crystal paperweight. Behind it sat Kim Junho himself, dressed in another impeccable suit, this one charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that probably cost more than Maya's car. "Miss Chun," he said, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Maya settled into a leather chair that was more comfortable than her bed at home. Kim Junho remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city below. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken purpose. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," Kim Junho said finally, turning from the window to face her. "The truth is, Miss Chun, I have a proposition for you. A job offer, if you will." Maya's throat felt dry. "What kind of job?" Kim Junho moved to his desk and opened the laptop with precise movements. The screen displayed what appeared to be financial documents, numbers that made Maya's eyes widen with disbelief. "I need a medical professional," he said without preamble. "Someone with discretion, someone with skill, someone I can trust absolutely." The position would pay $150,000 per year, with full medical school tuition covered and immediate funding for any family medical expenses. Maya stared at the numbers on the screen, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. $150,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having. It was freedom from debt, from the crushing weight of choosing between her mother's medication and her own education. It was everything she had been working toward, handed to her like a gift from a dangerous angel. "What would I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kim Junho closed the laptop and leaned against his desk, his dark eyes serious and direct. "You would provide medical care for members of my organization," he said. "Treat injuries, manage ongoing health concerns, maintain absolute confidentiality about anything you see or hear. You would live on my property for security purposes and be available when needed, but your time would largely be your own." Maya felt her heart racing. The offer was incredible, life-changing, but she wasn't naive about what Kim Junho's organization likely involved. "You're talking about treating criminals," she said. "Gunshot wounds, knife injuries, things I would normally be required to report to authorities." Kim Junho nodded, his expression grave but not apologetic. "Yes," he said simply. "That is exactly what I'm talking about. The men who work for me operate in a world where traditional medical care is not always an option. They need someone they can trust, someone who understands that discretion is not just preferred but absolutely essential." Maya's mind reeled with the implications. She would be complicit in crimes, helping violent men avoid consequences for their actions. Everything she had been taught about medical ethics screamed against such a role. But the alternative was watching her mother die slowly while drowning in debt, was years of struggle with no guarantee of success, was the constant threat of men like Derek who saw her as prey. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. Kim Junho's expression softened slightly. "Then you go back to your life," he said. "I will ensure that Derek Patterson and his associates never bother you again regardless of your decision. You owe me nothing, Miss Chun. This offer is made freely, with no coercion intended. And if I say yes, what exactly would you expect from me?" Kim Junho moved to one of the windows, his silhouette framed against the city skyline. "Loyalty," he said. "Complete and unwavering loyalty to me and my interests. Absolute silence about anything you see, hear, or do in your capacity as my medical provider. And the understanding that once you enter my world, leaving becomes significantly more complicated." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "That sounds like a threat," she said. Kim Junho turned to face her, his expression serious but not menacing. "It is a reality," he said. "The men who work for me have enemies. Those enemies would not hesitate to target anyone they perceived as valuable to me. Once you accept this position, your safety becomes my responsibility, but it also becomes my priority. You would be under my protection, But that protection comes with certain constraints. Maya tried to process the weight of what he was offering. Financial freedom for her and her mother, but at the cost of her independence and possibly her soul. A chance to save lives, but the lives of criminals and killers. Safety from Derek, but only by placing herself under the control of a man who was infinitely more dangerous. How much time do I have to decide? She asked. 24 hours, Kim Junho said. I need an answer by this time tomorrow. If you accept, we can begin making arrangements immediately. Your mother's next treatment can be scheduled at the finest cancer center in the country. Your student loans can be eliminated within the week. Maya stared out the window at the city below, at the thousands of people living normal lives without impossible choices hanging over their heads. She thought about her mother, growing weaker every day despite the treatments they could barely afford. She thought about her own dreams of becoming a doctor, of saving lives and making a difference. She thought about the brutal reality of her financial situation and the years of struggle that stretched ahead even if everything went perfectly. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Of course. Why me? You could hire any number of qualified medical professionals, doctors who are already established, who have experience with trauma medicine. Why offer this to a pre-med student you met 3 days ago? Kim Junho was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the windows. Because, he said finally, in my experience, competence can be bought, but character cannot. You returned a wallet containing $10,000 in cash when you could have kept it and solved all your problems. You stood up to an abusive ex-boyfriend rather than give him money you needed for your mother's treatment. You worked double shifts while maintaining a perfect GPA because you refused to compromise your goals. Character like that is rare, Miss Chun. And in my line of work, character is worth more than gold. Maya's breath caught. When did I return a wallet? She asked. Last month, Kim Junho said. Outside the university library. The wallet belonged to one of my associates. He was quite impressed by your honesty, especially when he learned about your financial circumstances. I've been aware of you for some time, Miss Chun. The events in the diner simply provided an opportunity to approach you. Maya felt a mixture of admiration and unease at the revelation that she had been watched, evaluated, chosen. Kim Junho operated in a world where nothing was left to chance, where even kindness was strategic. I need to think about this, she said. Of course. My driver will take you home. He extended a business card, different from the one he had given her in the diner. This contains a secure phone number. Call when you've made your decision. Maya took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. The cardstock was thick and expensive, embossed with a simple phone number and nothing else. She stood to leave, her legs unsteady beneath her. Miss Chun, Kim Junho said as she reached the door. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I respect your courage. Few people your age have faced the choices you've been given with such grace. Maya paused at the threshold, looking back at the man who could change her life with a single phone call. Thank you, she said, for everything. The offer, the protection, giving Derek what he deserved. Kim Junho's smile was gentle, almost paternal. Derek Patterson made choices that led to consequences, he said. I simply ensured those consequences arrived more quickly than they might have otherwise. The elevator ride down felt like descending from Mount Olympus back to the mortal world. Maya sat in the sedan during the drive home, staring at Kim Junho's business card and trying to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly afraid, constantly struggling, constantly choosing between impossible options. Back in her tiny apartment, Maya spread her mother's medical bills across the kitchen table next to her own student loan statements. The numbers were devastating in their relentless accumulation. Even if she worked every available shift at the diner, even if she graduated and found a good residency, the debt would follow her for decades. She thought about Kim Junho's offer, about the laptop screen showing more money than she had ever dreamed of having. She thought about her mother receiving the best possible treatment instead of the bare minimum their insurance would cover. She thought about walking into medical school without the crushing weight of financial anxiety. But she also thought about treating gunshot wounds without asking questions, about keeping secrets that could send men to prison, about living under the protection and control of a Korean crime boss who eliminated problems with lethal efficiency. Maya picked up her phone and stared at Kim Junho's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button, trembling with the weight of a decision that would reshape her entire life. Whatever choice she made, there would be no going back. 24 hours had never seemed so brief or so eternal. Maya stared at Kim Junho's business card for 23 hours and 57 minutes. She had carried it with her to classes, to work, to the hospital where her mother received chemotherapy. She had held it while watching her mother sleep, exhausted from treatments they could barely afford. She had gripped it while balancing her checkbook and realizing that even working every available shift wouldn't cover next month's expenses. At exactly 5 minutes before the deadline, Maya picked up her phone and dialed the number. Kim Junho answered on the second ring, his voice calm and unsurprised, as if he had been waiting by the phone. "Miss Chun," he said, "have you reached a decision?" Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her mother's medical bills were spread across the kitchen table like accusations. Her student loan statements sat beside them like prison sentences. Derek's threats echoed in her memory like ghost whispers promising future violence. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was committing to. There was a brief pause, and when Kim Junho spoke again, Maya could hear something that might have been relief in his voice. "Excellent," he said. "My associate will collect you tomorrow morning at 9. Bring only personal items. Everything else will be provided." The line went dead, leaving Maya staring at her phone and wondering what she had just done. Kim Junho's compound was not what Maya had expected. Instead of the stark fortress she had imagined, it was a sprawling estate that managed to project both luxury and security without feeling like a prison. The main house was modern but warm, with clean lines and enormous windows that let in natural light. The grounds were landscaped with precision, every tree and shrub placed with deliberate care. Maya's quarters occupied the entire east wing of the house, a self-contained apartment with a bedroom, sitting room, and private bathroom that was larger than her entire previous apartment. The medical facility was adjacent to her living space, connected by a private corridor that ensured she could respond to emergencies without compromising security protocols. The medical suite itself was extraordinary. It contained equipment that most hospitals would envy, from state-of-the-art imaging machines to surgical tools that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Everything was pristine, organized with military precision, and clearly maintained by people who understood the critical importance of sterile environments. Kim Junho gave her the tour personally, his manner professional but attentive. "This is where you'll work," he said, gesturing to the main treatment room. "The pharmacy is fully stocked with standard medications and some specialty items that are difficult to obtain through conventional channels. If you need something we don't have, my people can acquire it within hours." Maya ran her fingers along the examination table, amazed by the quality of everything around her. "This must have cost a fortune," she said. Kim Junho's smile was slight but genuine. "A man in my position cannot afford to compromise on medical care," he said. "The people who work for me face certain occupational hazards. They deserve the best possible treatment when injuries occur." Maya was settling into her new routine when the first emergency arrived. It was her third day at the compound, and she was reviewing the medical supplies inventory when Kim Junho's voice came through the intercom system with controlled urgency. "Maya, I need you in the medical suite immediately. We have a priority patient incoming." Maya's heart rate spiked with adrenaline, but her hands remained steady as she prepared for whatever was coming. She had trained for this, had dreamed of saving lives under pressure. The fact that the patient was likely a criminal didn't change her fundamental obligation to preserve life. The doors burst open, and 4 men carried in a fifth who was bleeding heavily from his shoulder. Maya's medical training took over, pushing aside all other considerations. The patient was Korean, probably in his 30s, unconscious but breathing. The bullet wound was high on the left shoulder, missing major arteries, but requiring immediate attention. "Get him on the table," Maya commanded, her voice clear and authoritative. "You, apply pressure to the wound. You, start in 4-line. Move." The men obeyed without hesitation, and Maya realized with surprise that they were taking orders from her without question. In their world of hierarchy and respect, Kim Junho's choice to trust her carried enormous weight. The surgery took 3 hours. The bullet had fragmented, requiring careful extraction and extensive cleaning of the wound. Maya worked with focused intensity, her hands steady and precise as she repaired damaged tissue, and ensured no metal fragments remained embedded in muscle. Kim Junho appeared in the doorway halfway through the procedure, still wearing his expensive suit, but with sleeves rolled up and concern evident in his dark eyes. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "He'll live," Maya said without looking up from her work. "The bullet missed everything vital, but there's significant soft tissue damage. He'll need physical therapy and several weeks of restricted activity." Kim Junho nodded, his relief visible. The patient was clearly important to him, probably a trusted lieutenant or family member. Maya found herself working even more carefully, understanding that this man's recovery would reflect on her competence and trustworthiness. When the surgery was complete and the patient stable, Maya finally allowed herself to step back and assess what she had accomplished. She had performed complex trauma surgery in a private medical facility, treating a gunshot wound without reporting it to authorities, saving the life of a man who was probably a criminal. She should have felt compromised, should have questioned her choices. Instead, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. She had used her skills to save a life. The circumstances were unconventional, but the outcome was unquestionably good. Kim Junho appeared with coffee and a plate of food she hadn't realized she was hungry for. "You did excellent work," he said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. "My men are impressed, and they don't impress easily." Maya accepted the coffee gratefully, her hands shaking slightly with post-surgical exhaustion. "Is he family?" she asked. Kim Junho's expression grew thoughtful. "In a way," he said. "Lee Min-jun has worked for me for 8 years. He saved my life twice and has never once betrayed my trust. In my world, that makes him closer than blood." Maya understood. Kim Junho had created a family of choice, bound together by loyalty and shared danger. The traditional definitions of right and wrong became murky when applied to people who lived outside conventional society's rules. Over the following weeks, Maya settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. She maintained the medical facility, treated minor injuries and illnesses among Kim Junho's staff, and continued her medical studies using textbooks and online resources that were far superior to what the university provided. Most evenings, she and Kim Junho shared dinner in the formal dining room. The meals were prepared by a Korean chef who seemed to understand Maya's preferences without being told, and the conversation ranged from medical ethics to literature to Kim Junho's observations about human nature. Maya found herself looking forward to these dinners more than she wanted to admit. Kim Junho was intelligent, well-read, and surprisingly thoughtful. He asked about her mother's progress, remembered details about her studies, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. One evening, after a particularly long surgery to repair a knife wound, Maya emerged from the medical suite exhausted and emotionally drained. The patient had been a young man, barely older than herself, and the injury had been severe enough to require several hours of delicate work. Kim Junho was waiting in her sitting room when she returned to her quarters, holding a cup of tea and wearing an expression of concern. "You look tired," he said. "It was a long surgery," Maya replied, sinking into the comfortable chair across from him. "The kid will be fine, but it was touch and go for a while." Kim Junho studied her face with the same intensity he brought to everything else. "You're questioning whether this is what you signed up for," he said. Maya considered lying, maintaining professional distance, but she was too exhausted for pretense. "Sometimes," she admitted. "When they're young, when they're scared, it's hard not to wonder how they ended up in your world." Kim Junho was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Most of them don't choose this life," he said finally. "They're born into poverty, abandoned by systems that should protect them, forced to make impossible choices at ages when they should be worried about homework and dating. I try to give them better options, but sometimes the damage is already done." Maya looked at him with new understanding. He wasn't just a crime boss building an empire. He was trying to create something better for people who had been discarded by conventional society. It didn't justify everything he did, but it explained why men like Lee Min-jun were willing to die for him. "Why do you do all this for me?" Maya asked suddenly. "The money, the protection, the respect you show me. What do you get out of it?" Kim Junho met her eyes directly, and for a moment his carefully controlled mask slipped. "You remind me that not everything good in the world gets destroyed," he said quietly. "In my line of work, it's easy to forget that kindness exists, that people can be trusted, that there are still those who choose to heal rather than harm. Maya felt her heart skip at the raw honesty in his voice. She realized with sudden clarity that their relationship had evolved beyond employer and employee, beyond protector and protected. There was genuine caring between them, a connection that transcended the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Her mother's cancer treatment was progressing better than anyone had dared hope. The new oncologist Kim Junho had arranged was a miracle worker, using cutting-edge therapies that were already showing remarkable results. Maya's student loans had been quietly eliminated, and her acceptance to medical school was now a foregone conclusion rather than a desperate dream. For the first time in years, Maya felt like she could breathe freely. The constant anxiety about money was gone. The fear of Derek was a distant memory. She was using her skills to save lives and learning from medical professionals who respected her abilities. But she was also falling in love with a man whose world was built on violence, and whose protection came with strings she was only beginning to understand. As Maya sat in her luxurious quarters, sipping tea with Kim Junho and watching his careful mask slip to reveal genuine emotion, she realized that she had crossed a line she hadn't even known existed. She was no longer just his employee or even his protected ward. She was becoming something far more dangerous and infinitely more precious. The woman who could make Kim Junho remember what it felt like to be human. The emergency call came at 3 in the morning, jolting Maya from deep sleep. Kim Junho's voice through the intercom was controlled but urgent, carrying an undertone of something she had never heard before: fear. "Maya, I need you immediately. My nephew has been shot. He's losing blood fast." Maya was in the medical suite within 2 minutes, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The doors burst open and Kim Junho himself carried in a boy who couldn't have been more than 16. The child was unconscious, his face pale as paper, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage wrapped around his abdomen. Maya's medical training took over completely. "Get him on the table now," she commanded. Kim Junho obeyed without hesitation, his expensive suit stained with his nephew's blood, his carefully controlled composure cracking at the edges. The bullet had torn through the boy's intestinal wall and nicked an artery. Maya worked with desperate precision, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she repaired torn tissue and stopped internal bleeding. This wasn't a criminal or a soldier. This was a child caught in violence he was too young to understand. Kim Junho stood against the wall, his face a mask of controlled anguish. Maya had never seen him look vulnerable before, and the sight of this powerful man reduced to helpless terror by a child's pain made her heart ache with unexpected sympathy. The surgery took 4 hours. When Maya finally stepped back, exhausted but satisfied that she had saved the boy's life, she found Kim Junho in the same position, as if he had been frozen in place by fear and hope. "He'll live," Maya said softly. "Full recovery expected." The bullet missed everything vital, but it was close. Another few minutes, and we might have lost him. Kim Junho's shoulders sagged with relief, so profound it seemed to physically diminish him. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Youngwoo is all the family I have left." Maya cleaned her hands methodically, stealing glances at Kim Junho's face. The boy was sleeping peacefully now, monitored by machines that tracked his vital signs with electronic vigilance. The immediate crisis had passed, but something in Kim Junho's expression suggested that deeper wounds had been reopened. "I'll stay with him tonight," Kim Junho said. "Make sure he's stable." Maya nodded, understanding the need to maintain vigil over someone precious. She gathered her medical supplies, but paused at the doorway when Kim Junho spoke again. "Would you stay?" he asked. "Not as a doctor. Just stay?" Maya looked at this powerful, dangerous man who commanded respect and fear throughout the city, now asking for simple human companionship in his moment of vulnerability. Without hesitation, she pulled up a chair beside his. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Jungwoo's peaceful sleep and listening to the steady rhythm of medical monitors. The medical suite felt isolated from the rest of the world, a sanctuary where normal rules didn't apply and pretense could be abandoned. "He's your brother's son?" Maya asked quietly. Kim Junho was silent for so long that Maya thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, in a voice she had never heard him use before, raw and unguarded, he began to speak. "I had a younger sister," he said, his eyes fixed on Jungwoo's sleeping form. Miao. She was 5 years younger than me. Everything good and pure in a family that was already being consumed by violence and crime. When our parents died, I promised myself I would protect her, give her a different life than the one I was choosing. Maya waited, sensing that Kim Junho needed to tell this story at his own pace. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, knuckles white with tension. She met a man when she was 22. Kim Junho continued. American businessman, charming, successful. He seemed perfect, clean, nothing like the men in my world. I was relieved that she had found someone who could give her the normal life I wanted for her. Maya felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. She could guess where this story was heading, could see the pain etched in every line of Kim Junho's face. At first, everything seemed perfect, Kim Junho said. Maya was happy, in love, planning a future with this man. I was busy building my organization, expanding our territory, fighting wars that seemed important at the time. I didn't notice when she stopped calling as often. I didn't pay attention when she started making excuses not to see me. Kim Junho's voice cracked slightly, and Maya resisted the urge to reach out and comfort him. This confession was costing him everything, and she knew he needed to finish it. The first time I saw her with bruises, she had the same excuses you used to have, he said. Clumsy, accident-prone. I knew better, but I told myself it wasn't my business. She was an adult. She could make her own choices. I was too focused on my empire to interfere in her personal life. Maya's heart broke for the young woman she had never met and for the man sitting beside her, torturing himself with guilt over choices he couldn't change. It escalated over months. Kim Junho continued. Broken ribs, she claimed, came from falling downstairs. Black eyes she blamed on sports accidents. Burns on her arms, she said, were from cooking mishaps. Each lie was more transparent than the last. But I let her tell them because confronting the truth would have meant admitting I was failing her. The medical monitors beeped steadily, marking time in their electronic rhythm. Kim Junho's breathing was carefully controlled, but Maya could see the effort it took to maintain his composure. The night she died, she called me, Kim Junho said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 in the morning, just like tonight. She was terrified, crying, begging me to come get her. She said he had a gun, said he was going to kill her. I told her I would be there in 20 minutes. Kim Junho stopped speaking, his jaw clenched so tightly Maya could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. She waited, her own heart pounding with dread for a story she already knew would end in tragedy. I was too late, Kim Junho said finally. 19 minutes. I was 1 minute too late. When I arrived, she was already dead. He had shot her 3 times and then killed himself. The neighbors said the gunshots happened just as I was pulling into the driveway. Maya felt tears she hadn't expected sliding down her cheeks. The pain in Kim Junho's voice was devastating. The guilt and rage and helplessness of a man who had dedicated his life to power but had been powerless when it mattered most. I built this empire to protect the people I cared about, Kim Junho said, his voice steady again, but carrying a weight of sorrow that seemed bottomless. But I was too focused on building walls and acquiring weapons to notice that the person who mattered most was already under attack. I couldn't save her, but I can save you. Maya understood now why her bruises had triggered such a powerful response in him, why he had eliminated Derek with such efficient brutality, why he surrounded her with protection that seemed excessive. She wasn't just an employee or even a person he cared about. She was his chance for redemption, his opportunity to rewrite a story that had ended in devastating failure. Without thinking, Maya reached out and covered his hands with her own. His skin was warm but trembling slightly, and she could feel the tension thrumming through his entire body like a taut wire. You're not responsible for what happened to her, Maya said softly. You couldn't have known it would escalate so quickly. You couldn't have controlled his actions. Kim Junho looked at their joined hands, his expression wondering, as if he hadn't experienced simple human comfort in years. I should have seen the signs, he said. I should have acted sooner. I should have killed him the first time I suspected he was hurting her. Maya squeezed his hands gently. Then you would have been a murderer, and she would have hated you for it. You tried to respect her choices, her autonomy. That's what people who love each other do. Kim Junho's eyes met hers, and Maya saw something shift in their dark depths. The careful control he maintained was cracking, revealing the raw humanity beneath his dangerous exterior. For the first time since she had known him, he looked young, vulnerable, human. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of confession and terror. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had known this moment was coming, had felt the growing connection between them, but hearing him say it made everything real and immediate and terrifying. "I know I am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Kim Junho lifted one hand to touch her face, his fingers gentle against her skin. "You should run," he said. "You should take the money I've given you and disappear somewhere I can never find you. Being with me will put you in constant danger." Maya leaned into his touch, closing her eyes and making a choice that would reshape her entire life. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm not Maya. I know what you are, what your world involves, and I'm choosing to stay anyway." Kim Junho pulled her closer, and Maya found herself in his arms, breathing in the expensive cologne and underlying scent that was uniquely his. For a moment, the medical suite fell away, and there was only the two of them and the decision they were making to trust each other with their hearts despite every rational objection. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, filled with the recognition of how much they both had to lose. When they broke apart, Maya saw her own wonder reflected in Kim Junho's eyes. The peaceful moment shattered when Kim Junho's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression hardened as he read the text, the vulnerable man disappearing behind his professional mask. "What is it?" Maya asked. "Surveillance photos," he said grimly, showing her the phone screen. Maya saw images of herself leaving the hospital after visiting her mother, walking across the university campus, entering the coffee shop where she sometimes studied. Someone had been watching her, tracking her movements with professional precision. "Who would be following me?" Maya asked. But even as she spoke, she felt a chill of recognition. The photos had the same calculated quality as Kim Junho's operation, the same attention to detail and strategic planning. "The Nakamura Syndicate," Kim Junho said, his voice deadly calm. "They're a rival Korean organization based in Los Angeles. It appears they've learned about your importance to me and decided you represent a valuable pressure point." Maya's blood ran cold. Just when she had begun to feel safe, when she had started to believe the violence of Kim Junho's world wouldn't touch her directly, a new threat had emerged from the shadows. Over the next week, the surveillance became more aggressive. Maya noticed the same faces in different locations, cars that followed her at carefully maintained distances, the feeling of being watched even in supposedly secure locations. Kim Junho increased her security detail, but the watchers remained just beyond reach, professional ghosts who documented her every movement. The attempted kidnapping happened on a Thursday afternoon outside the cancer center where her mother received treatment. Maya was leaving after a consultation with the oncologist when three men approached her in the parking garage. They moved with coordinated precision, cutting off her escape routes and advancing with the confidence of professionals who had planned every detail. Maya's training in Kim Junho's world had taught her to recognize danger, and she immediately pressed the panic button on the security device he had given her. But the men were fast, and one of them had a syringe similar to the one Derek's friend had carried. The attack might have succeeded if not for Kim Junho's security team, who had been monitoring the situation from concealed positions. The confrontation was brief and violent, ending with two of the attackers unconscious and the third fleeing with a broken arm. Maya sat in the back of an armored sedan afterward, her hands shaking with delayed shock, while Kim Junho's security chief explained what had happened. The men were definitely Nakamura operatives, professionals sent to capture rather than kill her. When Kim Junho arrived at the compound that evening, his fury was a cold, controlled thing that made the air feel dangerous. Maya had never seen him like this, had never witnessed the full force of his rage when someone threatened what belonged to him. "They made a mistake," he said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of terrible retribution. "They attacked what's mine. Now they learn why that was the worst decision they could have made." Maya watched Kim Junho make phone calls in languages she didn't recognize, coordinating responses that would probably involve violence on a scale she couldn't imagine. She realized with crystal clarity that his protection wasn't paranoia or possessiveness, but a brutal necessity in a world where showing weakness invited destruction. For the first time since accepting his offer, Maya understood that she wasn't just Kim Junho's doctor or his girlfriend. She was his vulnerability, the thing his enemies would use against him. And that meant the war that was coming was as much her responsibility as his. The war began at dawn on Friday morning, though Maya only learned about it through the sudden absence of Kim Junho and half his men. She woke to find the compound eerily quiet, with only essential security staff remaining and an atmosphere of controlled tension that made her skin prickle with anxiety. Youngwoo was recovering well from his surgery, chattering about returning to school and seemingly oblivious to the larger conflict swirling around him. Maya envied his innocence as she checked his vitals and adjusted his medication, wishing she could share his optimism about the future. Kim Junho had left before sunrise without saying goodbye, and Maya understood why. In his world, emotional attachments were weaknesses that enemies could exploit. Saying goodbye would have been an admission that he might not return, a possibility neither of them was prepared to acknowledge. But as the hours stretched into an endless day of waiting, Maya found herself consumed by fears she hadn't expected. She had fallen in love with a man whose profession involved calculated violence, whose enemies would kill him without hesitation if they found an advantage. The money, the security, the protection he provided meant nothing if he didn't survive to continue offering them. Maya tried to focus on her medical duties, updating patient files and organizing supplies with compulsive precision. But her mind kept returning to Kim Junho's last words before he left. "Take care of yourself, Maya-chun. This will be over soon." The phrase carried the weight of promise and threat combined. Kim Junho intended to end the Nakamura threat permanently, but wars had a way of consuming everyone involved. Maya realized with devastating clarity that she had more to lose now than she ever had when she was struggling alone. By evening, fragments of information began filtering back to the compound. Phone calls in rapid Korean, terse status updates that Maya couldn't understand, but whose tone spoke of progress and escalation. The security chief, a grizzled man named Park who usually treated her with distant respect, began checking on her hourly with obvious concern. The waiting became unbearable as night fell. Maya found herself pacing through her quarters, starting at every sound, wondering if the next phone call would bring news of Kim Junho's death. She had never experienced fear like this, the terror of loving someone whose life was constantly in danger. Saturday passed in the same suspended reality of incomplete information and escalating dread. Maya treated minor injuries among the remaining staff and tried to maintain the appearance of normal routine, but everyone at the compound could feel the tension building towards some inevitable conclusion. It was Youngwoo who finally voiced what they were all thinking. "Aunt Maya," he said during one of her medical checks, his young face serious with premature wisdom, "Uncle Junho is fighting bad men, isn't he?" Maya's throat tightened with emotion at being called aunt, at this child's implicit acceptance of her place in their family. "Yes," she said softly. "He's making sure we're all safe. He always comes home," Youngwoo said with the confidence of youth. "Uncle Junho never loses." Maya hoped desperately that Jungwoo's faith would prove justified. Sunday morning brought silence that felt different from the previous day's tension. The phone calls stopped abruptly, the hurried conferences between security staff ended, and an expectant hush settled over the compound like snow. Maya found herself holding her breath, listening for sounds that might indicate Kim Junho's return. At 3 in the afternoon, the main gates opened to admit a convoy of black vehicles. Maya watched from her window as Kim Junho's sedan led the procession up the circular drive, followed by cars carrying men she recognized as his most trusted lieutenants. They had returned, but the question remained whether they had returned victorious or merely survived. Maya met Kim Junho at the front entrance, her heart hammering with relief and anxiety in equal measure. He looked exhausted, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain and sleeplessness. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there was something in his dark eyes that spoke of decisions made and actions taken that couldn't be undone. But he was alive. He was whole. He was home. "Is it over?" Maya asked, searching his face for confirmation of what she desperately needed to hear. Kim Junho nodded slowly, his expression carrying the weight of whatever had transpired during the 3 days he was gone. The Nakamura Syndicate is no longer operational, he said quietly. Their leadership has been permanently eliminated. Their remaining soldiers have been absorbed into other organizations or fled the country. The threat to you, to all of us, no longer exists. Maya felt her knees weaken with relief, so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. She had prepared herself for the possibility that Kim Junho might not return, had steeled herself for a future where she would have to navigate his dangerous world alone. To have him standing before her, safe and victorious, felt like a miracle she didn't deserve. How many? She asked, needing to understand the cost of her safety. Kim Junho's expression grew distant, professional. 17 confirmed casualties among their leadership and primary operatives, he said. Clean eliminations, no collateral damage, no civilian involvement. It was precisely executed to send a message throughout the Korean community that attacking my family carries terminal consequences. Maya absorbed this information with the detachment her new life had taught her. 17 men were dead because they had threatened her. 17 families would mourn because someone had decided she was worth targeting. The weight of that responsibility should have crushed her, but instead she felt only gratitude that Kim Junho had survived to protect what mattered to him. You look like you haven't slept in days, Maya said, reaching out to touch his face. Come inside. Let me take care of you. Kim Junho leaned into her touch with an expression of wonder, as if he had forgotten what gentleness felt like. I need to debrief with my security staff, he said. Update protocols. Ensure there are no loose ends that could resurface later. Maya understood the necessity but also saw the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. The debriefing can wait an hour, she said firmly, taking his hand and leading him toward his private quarters. You need food, rest, and someone to remind you that you're more than just a weapon pointed at your enemies. Kim Junho allowed himself to be led, and Maya realized with a start that this powerful, dangerous man trusted her enough to show vulnerability. In his world of constant threats and calculated responses, her presence represented safety and peace. Maya ran a bath for Kim Junho while he sat on the edge of his bed, mechanically removing his ruined suit. She had never been in his private quarters before, and she was struck by the contrast between the compound's public areas and his personal space. Where the rest of the house projected wealth and power, his bedroom was surprisingly simple, almost austere. The few personal items spoke of a man who had learned not to become too attached to things that could be lost or destroyed. The bath helped ease some of the tension from Kim Junho's shoulders, but Maya could see that deeper wounds remained. He had spent 3 days becoming the monster his enemies feared, and returning to humanity required more than hot water and soap. Over dinner, Kim Junho gradually shed the cold persona he wore during business operations. Maya told him about Jungwoo's recovery, about the improvements in her mother's cancer treatment, about the small domestic details that had continued despite the larger conflict. Slowly, she watched him remember who he was beyond his reputation and responsibilities. After dinner, they sat together on the couch in Kim Junho's sitting room. Maya curled against his side while he held her with the desperate intensity of someone who had feared never experiencing such simple intimacy again. The silence between them was comfortable, heavy with unspoken recognition of how much they had both risked and how much they had gained. I told myself this war was about protecting my organization, Kim Junho said finally, his voice quiet in the darkened room. About maintaining respect and preventing other syndicates from seeing weakness they could exploit. Maya felt his chest rise and fall beneath her cheek, steady and warm and reassuringly alive. But that wasn't the real reason, was it? She said. Kim Junho's laugh was soft and rueful. No, he said. The real reason was that they threatened you. They made you afraid. They tried to take you away from me. Everything else was justification for what I was always going to do the moment they made you a target. Maya lifted her head to look at his face, seeing the raw honesty in his dark eyes. You could have been killed, she said. Jungwoo could have lost the only family he has left. Your entire organization could have been destroyed. All for me. Kim Junho's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing along her cheek with reverent gentleness. Maya-chun, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. You are not just someone I'm protecting. You're not just an employee or even someone I care about. You're the reason I remember what it means to be human instead of just a weapon. You're the light that makes all this darkness bearable." Maya felt tears she hadn't expected sliding down her cheeks. She had spent so much of her life feeling worthless, disposable, a burden on everyone who tried to help her. To hear this powerful, incredible man say that she was his light felt like receiving a gift she could never deserve. "I love you," she said, the words carrying everything she felt but couldn't express. "Not just gratitude or attraction or the security you provide. I love who you are when the world isn't watching. I love the man who saves abandoned children and remembers his sister with such pain. I love you enough to stay in this dangerous world if it means being with you." Kim Junho pulled her closer, his arms tightening around her as if he could protect her from everything simply by holding her tight enough. "You're mine," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know that's not romantic or politically correct, but it's the truth. You belong to me, and I belong to you, and nothing in this world or any other will ever change that." Maya felt her heart leap at the possessive declaration, understanding that in Kim Junho's world, claiming ownership was the deepest expression of love he knew how to give. "I'm yours," she agreed, her voice steady and certain. "And you're mine, broken pieces and all. Forever," Kim Junho said, pulling her up for a kiss that tasted like promises and sealed their commitment with the finality of a blood oath. When they broke apart, Kim Junho reached for something on the side table Maya hadn't noticed before. It was a small velvet box, simple and elegant, containing a ring that took Maya's breath away. The diamond was flawless, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the lamplight like captured stars, but it was the inscription inside the band that made her heart stop. "My light in the darkness," it read in delicate script. "Marry me," Kim Junho said, his voice carrying none of his usual command but all of his desperate hope. "Not because you owe me anything or because it's practical or safe. Marry me because I love you more than my own life, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you never forget how precious you are." Maya stared at the ring, understanding that accepting it would mean committing to a life she never could have imagined. She would be the wife of a Korean crime boss, protected by violence and surrounded by luxury built on foundations she didn't want to examine too closely. But she would also be cherished by a man who had moved heaven and earth to keep her safe, who had rewritten his entire understanding of love and vulnerability because she had walked into his world. "Yes," Maya said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Yes to all of it. The ring, the marriage, the life we'll build together. Yes to being yours and you being mine." Kim Junho slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, and Maya marveled at how something so small could feel so monumental. She was no longer Maya Chun, the struggling pre-med student. She was Maya Chun, future wife of Kim Junho, protected and cherished and loved beyond anything she had ever dreamed possible. 3 months later, Maya stood in the garden of the compound wearing a wedding dress that cost more than her old apartment's annual rent, surrounded by flowers that had been flown in from Korea specifically for the ceremony. Her mother sat in the front row, healthy and radiant thanks to treatments that had eliminated every trace of cancer from her body. Youngwoo served as ring bearer, beaming with pride at his role in making his beloved uncle happy. The wedding was small but perfect, attended only by family and Kim Junho's most trusted associates. The ceremony was conducted in both English and Korean, acknowledging both halves of their merged lives. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Kim Junho kissed Maya with the passionate intensity of a man who had found salvation in the most unlikely place. During the reception, Maya found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had walked into Nightingale Diner a year ago with bruises on her wrist and fear in her heart, a woman trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Tonight, she stood beside her husband in a garden filled with people who would die to protect her, secure in a love that had transformed them both. Kim Junho appeared at her side, handsome in his custom tuxedo, his dark eyes soft with contentment as he watched their guests celebrate their union. "Happy, Mrs. Kim?" he asked, using her new name with obvious satisfaction. Maya smiled, feeling the weight of her wedding ring and the warmth of her husband's presence and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "Completely," she said. "For the first time in my life, completely happy. Kim Junho raised his champagne glass in a toast that only she could hear. To my wife, he said, his voice carrying all the love and devotion he had learned to feel because she had taught him it was safe. To the woman who saved me from becoming a monster. To the light that guides me home. Maya clinked her glass against his, understanding that they had both been rescued by love in ways they were still discovering. She was no longer the terrified waitress hiding bruises and counting tips. She was Maya Kim, beloved wife of a man who had built an empire and then rebuilt his heart because she had shown him what was possible. As the evening stars appeared overhead and music drifted through the garden where they danced, Maya knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges their future held, they would face them together. She had found her place in Kim Junho's dangerous world, not as a victim seeking protection, but as the woman strong enough to love a man whose darkness served to protect the light they had created together. The scared girl counting tips at Nightingale Diner was gone forever, replaced by a woman who had discovered that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room was exactly the salvation she needed. And in Kim Junho's arms, surrounded by the security his love provided, Maya finally understood what it meant to be truly safe.